So now we've got 4 different tables of information. Let's just file save as, just so we don't lose anything here now that we've been working on it for a little while. So we'll put this into our Excel demo as well. Excel demo model. Right. So now, of course, if I'd have gone back to the source data and if I'd have kind of re-downloaded the 2020 transactions, or if I'd have included a new file with 2021, then I need to just press the refresh all button and all of the data in all of these folders will refresh. You can see it refreshing now. So now it's finished. You'll also see that there are no errors or anything here. That's kind of good, obviously. But it will tell you if there's something wrong, if it finds that it can't read or it can't load some of the rows for whatever reason. You will get some error messages kind of showing up here, so you just need to keep an eye on it. You can also organize things a bit, so you can, for example, make a new group just to organize things a bit. We don't have so many things here, so it's not so essential, but if we just say move to group lookups, it makes it easier later if this list gets a bit longer, just to keep things organized. Then I can minimize the group, for example. This one here, this just comes automatically from Excel, so you can just minimize that. Now what we're going to do is make some connections in our data model so that we can use all of those tables together in Power Pivot. So let's go into the data model. You'll see I'm still on the data tab. That's one way you can get into the data model. And in the data model, you'll see I've got a tab for each of those tables that I've pulled in. I'm actually going to go to diagram view because I think that that's easier to work with. And if you have more than one screen, you can kind of keep this diagram view on one screen and work on another. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to connect up the relevant fields so that we can, you know, actually have a pivot, a Power Pivot that's going to be able to pull data from these different tables into one report. So it's always good practice to go from the source data and up. So if we say account number is going to match with account number, it's relatively intuitive. Then we're going to have date is going to match with date. This is where you see if we still had date time here, it would be problematic because we don't have date time in this calendar lookup, because obviously, well, I mean, yeah, there would be way too many rows. So we only want to work with date, not date time. That's why we did that formatting earlier. And then of course we want to match up department as well. Let's see. There, if we go department should match to, I think it's ID there. You can look at a million different kind of online courses about Power Query and Power Pivot and find out all about these connection lines. You can see that there's just one to many here. That's like one field in this table is connecting to many in this, and it's just going one way. So there's a lot of different courses that you can do on this. I am by no means an expert, and this is a very simple data model here. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to minimize this, and we're going to go back to Excel, and then what we're going to do is we're going to put in a Power Pivot just to kind of demonstrate how this works. So if we go insert and pivot table, now what you're going to see is it looked the same as the other pivot table that we had when we built one earlier, but now I can pull things from lots of different tables. So say in this case I want to use I'm going to have a year as a filter, for example, and I want to have, let's say I want to have quarter name in columns, and let's say I want to have, I'm going to pick from my account list here my account number in rows, and I can now have my account name because I'm able to pick from this table here. And then from the general ledger table, I only need to have the local amount, which I can just put in there. Now let's just format this a bit so that it looks a bit better. So if I just left click here and go to value field settings and go to number format, let's have them as numbers like that. And let's go to design and just make this into a table. And let's say that actually I only want to have 1 year's worth of data. So let's just take 2020. And let's say I only want to have, I'm going to go to label filters now and say anything that is greater than 2999, because I just want my profit and loss accounts. So now I've got my essentially a profit and loss account or a profit and loss statement for 2020. And again, I can use this for querying, like drilling down. So if I double click on there, I get the transactions that lie behind. So this is really great for controllers. This is really great for kind of a quick and easy slice and dice to see what's going on. One other quick tip or trick here is that if I go back to Power Pivot, this is another way that I can get to the data model. And to make your life really much easier when you're building in Power Pivot, what you can do is, for example, if I was to right click here and say hide from client tools, I'm just going to give you this as an example, and that grays it out, because what I want to do is I actually want to pick my account number from here. I really want to pick my parameters from these lookup tables, not down here. So let's also hide that from client tools, because then it makes it easier when I'm actually in Power Pivot to figure out which field I want to pick, because of course it can get quite complicated as the data model grows. So let's again just minimize that and go back to, let's go back to our pivot table here. So now what you'll see if I open up this general ledger table, that I don't have the account number and the date anymore. So it just makes it easier, because then I know, oh, okay, of course, I need to go and pick it from here. There's a good reason for that, and I think as you get more into Power Pivot and Power Query, you'll kind of find it much easier if you just organize the data model so you have the minimum and number of fields available. Okay, what I did here was I just dragged this field into the values pane, which is kind of fine. It gave us what we wanted, but as you get deeper into Power Pivot, what you'll find is that it's recommended you don't do that, because it's a bit limited and it's much more powerful to actually make a measure. So if we go to our Power Pivot screen here and say measures and new measure, we can actually use a bit of DAX to create a measure. So I want to pick from my general ledger table a field, and I'm going to call it total trans, for example. I can obviously give it a much more intuitive name than you would find on what they call an implicit measure, where it just inherits the name of the field. So using measures or creating measures is the preferred way when you're working in Power Pivot. Just to go one step further, and that is to say, let's just copy this. Let's just say move or copy, just to make a point here. Yeah, so now we have a duplicate copy of our table. And what we can do here is, if we just go to design, we'll take away the totals. And what we'll do is we are going to change these, or this pivot table, into cube formulas. So I'm going to go to pivot table analyze, go to OLAP tools and convert to formulas. I now have something that looks like my pivot table, but each one of these fields are what's called a cube value. And the amazing thing about this is that if we just go back to the pivot table for a minute, well, we can't do anything with this pivot table. We can't format it. We can't make it look nice. We can click on the individual fields to drill down, so that's quite a good feature. But if we go to this, which is the pivot table that we've just turned into formulas, we can actually now format that. So we can say, okay, let's put a, well, let's do this. Let's chop it up a bit. Let's say, let's insert a row here or two. Let's do a subtotal. Okay, let's format that as well. Bold. Let's give it like that. Let's make it, let's say total sales. So you kind of see my point. We are able to just make the data look a little bit more intuitive. I mean, one can go on, one can keep formatting and make it look really, really nice. What you'll see if you look at these formulas, they're actually looking at different areas here. So if I just click here, what you'll see is it's looking at the name, it's looking at the measure name, and it's looking at the filter for the year here, and also the fact that we're looking at Q1. So it's quite easy to actually understand how these formulas are built up, and it's super easy to create them because obviously you just make a pivot table and turn it into formulas using that function that I showed you when we were clicking on, or when we were sitting on the pivot table here. So this OLAP tools convert to formulas. So you can make, as I say, some really nice and intuitive reports that, of course, when you go and update your source data in these files here, so say for example you download your 2020 transactions and refresh them, or do whatever you do in those folders there, when you come here and you basically click refresh data, everything will refresh. Your pivot tables will refresh, your cube formulas will refresh. So you can make yourself a kind of set of analytical models, if you like, that all you need to do is just come and refresh them. Now, one more really cool feature that I wanted to show you was that if we just make another page here, let's just make a page here called dashboard, and let's just take the grid lines off here. I could go back to this report that I've formatted now, and I can use the camera tool. If you haven't got the camera tool, you just need to go and turn it on by going into file and options down here. You can just Google that. But if I just highlight this and use my camera tool, I can go to my dashboard and I can just pop it there. Now this kind of becomes now sort of like a picture of what I've just made, but it's actually dynamic. So what I can have here is a stack of different control reports which all end up on a dashboard here. And what will happen is if I change anything here, let's say for example I say I'm gonna change this to being 2019, for example. It'll refresh, and it'll also refresh my dashboard here. So this allows you to kind of like build up a nice visual overview of these different reports or different kind of analytical models that you've made in Excel. So here's one example of one that I've made before. Just to give you an idea, this is just a PDF actually of one that I made before. But it just gives you an idea of how you can kind of stack up these different graphs and different kind of key performance indicators into a format that allows you to kind of easily print it out and take it with you on to the cabin or whatever you want to do with this. So that's it for today. That's all I wanted to show you in order to get some good use out of the Excel add-in. As we've kind of touched on before, this is not supposed to be necessarily a reporting tool, but you can build some quite nice reports in it. if you want to go one level up, we recommend going to Power BI, because Power BI is a dashboarding and reporting online tool that you can use to much more easily share information, and also obviously connect directly up to a database instead of having to download information into Excel and into folders. But for controllers, for CFOs, this is a really wonderful tool just to get your hands on your data and actually start manipulating it and doing some really cool things with it. So if you have any questions, just by all means give us a ring, and we look forward to hearing from you.